of Xiomara Castro. Madam Castro has been a loyal follower, in her own words, of Fidel Castro in Cuba and Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. Do I have to explain to this audience what those two murderers did to their countries? Maybe not, because everybody knows. Unfortunately, and because of that poisonous ideology that the current president has embraced, Fidel Castro has pushed the country into an economic collapse. Why do I say that? Then keep the door closed, please. Thank you. Thank you. Why do I say that? First, President Castro welcomed Communist China and suggested that she may give Palmerola Air Base to the Chinese. The Palmerola base is the key United States military installation in Latin America. Second, she broke relations with democratic Taiwan just to please China. Third, she gave another thug called Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela the highest medal of honor that the country can give to a civilian, the Order of Francisco Morazán. I am sure that Morazán has to be rolling in his grave. And fourth, flooded the country with Cuban spies dressed as doctors, teachers, and psychologists. 10 days from today, the fate of Honduras is in the hands of three candidates. Papito a la Orden, whose real name is Nasri Ascura, Salvador Nasrallah, and Rixi Moncada. Mrs. Moncada is the heir to the communist throne picked by the current president. Mrs. Moncada says that Cuba is a democracy and that she wants Honduras to look just like Cuba. Well, this is the way Cuba looks today. Sure that Hondurans do not want that. They're free. At this hour, the voters of Honduras are at a crossroads, and they should think long and hard who are they going to vote for. As the chairwoman of the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee within the House, it's not look at Venezuela. After 25 years, or 25 years ago, we're oblivious to the same thing I'm saying today, and not even having the largest in the world save them from the economic catastrophe they're living today. Socialism's number one goal is to corrode the democratic institution, especially the armed forces. The Honduran armed forces, the most powerful institution in the country, are demanding direct access to private voter information. The armed forces are demanding to know who voted for who. This is not the military, which has made Hondurans proud for over 100 years. At the same time, or the same military, I should say, that pulled Mel Zelaya, the husband of the current president, out of his bed in his PJs, sent him to Costa Rica in the middle of the night for wanting to do the same that his wife is trying to do right now, impose communism. The military of the country. So this committee is sending a very clear message, supported by the State Department and the Trump administration, that Honduras must hold a free, fair, and transparent election. No stolen ballots, no review. The act of the United States is upon Honduras is November 30th. In the United States, there are more than 1 million Hondurans, hundreds of thousands of them in my own district, Florida District number 27, the heart of the city of Miami. Oh, I know Hondurans very well. They're good people, hardworking, law-abiding, who have been beat by a political class that has not treated them well for decades. They deserve someone who's not taught to put the future of Honduras first. That is the candidates. Honduras Honduras deserves better. May the Lord guide them this November 3rd. So those are my remarks in English. I am so sorry. I'm going to have to say the same remarks in Spanish for those who are watching and those who are not present in this room. And then I will give my colleagues time to ask their questions. El próximo 30 de noviembre, Honduras no solamente va a elegir a un presidente, sino va a decidir si la nación va a seguir siendo libre o no, o si cae en las garras del comunismo. Ese día, el país no va a votar por un nombre, va a votar por un futuro. Y la responsabilidad del gobierno de los Estados Unidos y de este comité y del Comité de Asuntos Exteriores del Congreso es velar porque Honduras prevalezca la libertad y la democracia. Hace 4 años, el pueblo hondureño eligió a una presidenta socialista que se llama Xiomara Castro. La señora Castro se ha declarado con sus propias palabras admiradora de Fidel Castro y de Hugo Chávez. Yo no tengo que explicar lo que esos dos señores han hecho en su país. La miseria, el exilio y la represión hablan por sí solos. Lamentablemente, gracias a esa ideología tóxica que la señora Castro ha abrazado, Honduras ha sido empujada a un abismo económico. ¿Y por qué digo eso? Bueno, primero, porque la señora Castro le abrió las puertas al régimen comunista de China y hasta ha dicho que podría entregarles la base aérea de Palmerola, que es una instalación militar estadounidense la más importante en América Latina. Segundo, rompió relaciones con la democrática Taiwán para congraciarse con Beijing. Tercero, decoró al tirano con la más alta distinción civil de Honduras, la Orden de Francisco Morazán. Morazán debe estar revolcándose en la tumba después que eso pasó. Y cuarto, llenó al país de espías cubanos disfrazados de médicos, maestros y psicólogos. A 10 días de las elecciones, el futuro de Honduras está en manos de 3 candidatos. Papi a la orden, cuyo nombre verdadero es Nasri Apura, Salvador Nasralla y Rixi Moncada. Señora Moncada es la heredera del proyecto comunista seleccionado por la señora Castro. El pueblo hondureño se merece algo mejor. La señora Rixi dice que Cuba es una democracia y que quiere convertir a Honduras en el próximo paraíso caribeño. Vamos a ver cómo es el paraíso. Ese es el futuro que quieren para Honduras. En este momento, los votantes hondureños están en una encrucijada y deben pensar muy bien por quién van a votar. Como presidenta del subcomité del hemisferio occidental del Comité de Asuntos Exteriores de la Cámara de Representantes, yo no les estoy diciendo a nadie cómo tienen que votar. Lo único que les estoy diciendo es que no elijan a un comunista. Porque el comunismo es fantástico en la teoría y terrible en la práctica. Si no, pregúntenle a mis padres. Los venezolanos ignoraron esta misma advertencia hace 25 años. Y ni siquiera tener las mayores reservas de petróleo del planeta los han podido salvar de la catástrofe en la que vive Venezuela en este momento. Y ahora las Fuerzas Armadas, la institución más poderosa del país, está exigiendo acceso directo a la información privada de los votantes. Pero de cuando acá los militares tienen que estar contando votos. Ese no es el mismo ejército que ha hecho que Honduras se sienta orgulloso por más de 100 años. Ese es el mismo ejército que sacó a Mel Zelaya, esposo de la actual presidenta, de la cama, de su propia cama, en el medio de la madrugada, en pijama, y lo mandó para Costa Rica, porque estaba intentando hacer lo mismo que su esposa, implementar el comunismo en Honduras. En ese momento los militares le salvaron la vida al país, pues hoy, 16 años después, deben estar haciendo lo mismo. Por eso, este comité le está enviando un mensaje contundente y claro a las Fuerzas Armadas, que hay y respaldado este mensaje por el Departamento de Estado y por la administración del presidente Donald Trump, que Honduras tiene que celebrar elecciones libres, justas y transparentes, sin intimidación, sin colectivos, sin acta aprobada, sin interferencia extranjera. Los Estados Unidos tienen puestos sus ojos este próximo 30 de noviembre en Honduras. Hay más de 1 millón de hondureños en los Estados Unidos y cientos de ellos viven en mi distrito, el distrito número 27 del estado de la Florida, que es el corazón de la ciudad de Miami. gente buena, trabajadora, creyente y respetuosa de la ley que ha sufrido por una clase política que no los ha tratado bien en mucho tiempo. Se merecen un líder que no sea comunista, que piense primero en el futuro. Quien gane estas elecciones debe poner los intereses de la patria primero, incluyendo los dos candidatos de derecha. Que Dios proteja a Honduras, porque su futuro se va a decidir. I now recognize the ranking member from Texas, Representative Mr. Castro, for any statements that he made.
Thank you, Chairwoman. We are 11 months into a new Congress and a new administration. And this is the very first hearing our subcommittee is holding on the Western Hemisphere. President Trump has brought us to the brink of war with Venezuela without the consent of the people. He's carried out extrajudicial killings in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. He has cut off counter-narcotics cooperation with Colombia, a trusted ally. He sent hundreds to mass detention in El Salvador without any due process, and now threatens strikes against Mexico. He's canceled hundreds of millions in regional programs without explanation to Congress. And all of this has occurred without any hearings at all, without transparency, and without the oversight the Constitution requires. 11 months in, we haven't even had a budget hearing where a senior administration official comes before this committee and explains priorities for Latin America, the Caribbean, and the entire region. By November of the first year, when the Democrats were last in the majority, this subcommittee had held 7 hearings with the administration, testifying at 4 of them. And Chairwoman, I know you've pushed for the administration to provide a witness at this hearing. I strongly supported that request, and it's unacceptable that they are refusing to provide a witness for this hearing. In over a decade, actually a dozen years on this committee, I've never seen anything like this. The Republican administration is refusing to provide a hearing, a State Department witness for a Republican chairwoman. I think that's unprecedented, and it shows you the secrecy of the Trump administration. So, Chairwoman, I urge you to hold public hearings with the administration providing testimony on these serious issues in the hemisphere. And I will back up any request to come have the Trump administration testify. The American people deserve to hear what their government is doing, and this committee must exercise our oversight responsibilities. The hearing today, of course, is about Honduras, which will be holding elections in just 10 days. And I'm certainly concerned. It seems that the Honduran people's faith in their electoral institutions is at rock bottom. This is an election where the 3 major candidates could plausibly be within single-digit margins of each other without any runoffs. All 3 major candidates and their parties have made public statements that they do not trust this process, raising the possibility that they will not respect the results of the elections. Free and fair elections are the responsibility of everyone: the government, the opposition parties, the electoral authorities, the military, and the economic elite. The National Electoral Council, the entity responsible for organizing the elections, is deadlocked, under-resourced, and facing intense political pressure by both the government and opposition parties. The Honduran government declared a state of exception in 2022, restricting civil liberties and due process, and significantly restricted the ability of civil society to act freely and independently. We've also seen worrying levels of violence and intimidation against candidates, journalists, and civil society leaders across the political spectrum, which can chill participation and further undermine confidence in the election results. This is a difficult situation that Honduran officials, candidates, and civil society will have to navigate if they're to preserve their democracy. Unfortunately, the Trump administration has not met the moment. At the beginning of the year, the administration ended State Department and USAID programs that supported the rule of law and stronger electoral institutions in Honduras. Right before the critical March primary elections in Honduras, which Hondurans had serious concerns over, the administration cut funding for civil society organizations that would have provided much needed transparency. The Trump administration has also been unwilling to raise any concerns for most of the year, finally making a statement just a week ago when Deputy Secretary Landau raised concerns. Fortunately, Hondurans in the region seem to be mobilizing. I'm glad that the OAS, the European Union, and other organizations will be sending election missions to Honduras. I urge the government to provide them with the transparency and the freedom to conduct their work. And I'm hopeful that we will see a robust civil society presence at the elections to provide much needed transparency and hold both the government and opposition parties accountable to democratic values. I echo the OAS's recent call for the Honduran government to respect the independence of the National Electoral Council, which must conduct its work to ensure the elections are held on time. And when the elections are held, I hope that the authorities release verifiable results without delay. We should be principled in standing for democracy and the right of a people to elect their own leaders, regardless of whether the government is on the right or the left. While the United States and the international community can raise concerns and support Honduran society in advancing democratic values and norms, our role is not to pick the leaders of Honduras. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses at this hearing.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I hardly agree with you on many of the policy issues, but I do have to agree with you what you said. And we certainly hope that the State Department witness will come to one of these hearings in the very near future. Thank you for your comments. Now, other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We're pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this important topic. The Honorable Carlos Trujillo, former United States Ambassador to the Organization of American States, oldest regional international organization in the world. Before that, Ambassador Trujillo served as special representative to the General Assembly of the United Nations. He also served in the Florida House of Representatives for 4 terms. Thank you for being here, Ambassador. And Deborah Ulmer, the Regional Director of Latin America and the Caribbean Program at the National Democratic Institute. The NDI is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works to promote transparent and fair elections. Mr. Ulmer has spent over a decade living and working in Latin America on democracy issues for NDI, for Freedom House, and for the United States. Welcome, Matt. And lastly, we have Enrique Roy, Vice President of External Affairs at Human Rights First. Mr. Roy previously worked at the State Department and the USAID on Latin American issues and has testified before this committee in other capacities. This committee recognizes the importance of the issues before us and is grateful to have you here to speak today. The full statements will be made record, and I will ask you to keep your remarks to 5 minutes or less. And now I recognize Ambassador Trujillo for his opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Salazar, Ranking Member Castro, and the distinguished members of this committee. I'm deeply grateful for the invitation to appear before you today to offer testimony concerning the critical matter of the upcoming elections in Honduras. When Xiomara Castro was elected president in 2021, many welcomed her as a voice of change. Unfortunately, reality has been simple. She has institutionalized the government based on extreme political ideology and has repeatedly expressed an affinity to totalitarian regimes, including those of Venezuela. As the first month of the administration progressed, organized groups of Greek thugs, organized, funded by the government known as Peligro, influenced episodes of tension and violence and to intimidate the election authorities of the National Congress. Several high-level officials also chose to resign due to internal disagreements or differences in opinion with the government. Among them was Edmundo Orellana, served as Secretary of Transparency and Corruption. In the period leading up to the current election, civil society organizations, political sectors, and observers have expressed concerns over irregularities, particularly regarding delays and obstacles to contracting of essential services for election day. Recently, the tensions between the executive branch and the National Electoral Council have intensified. A former president of the Electoral Council, Lopez Torrio, has reported receiving death threats and judicial pressure according to her, were intended to push a resignation. Magistrate Anna Paul similarly conveyed public forums expressed their security, escalated concerns regarding a potential to replace current electoral authorities with individuals deemed much more aligned with the administration. Just last February, President Xiomara Castro of the government canceled the extradition agreement for narcotics trafficking and organized crime tradition to the United States. The agreement was ultimately reinstated. I believe the question to the committee is, why would she take such an extreme measure? She's also threatened to cancel the military cooperation of the American on the roll. Threats repeatedly, constantly. Another sensitive point is the role of the armed forces. We look at the historic record. Function election has been limited, custody and transit across the country. However, recent statements by the High Command, particularly the General Roosevelt Fernandez, have been interpreted by some sectors as an attempt to involve themselves in areas beyond their constitutional authority, raising concerns about their impartiality. I would also like to add the maneuvers performed within the National Congress by the leadership, similarly warrant close attention. The government of Honduras has been operating under the state of emergency since 2020. Constitutional safeguards and rights of citizens have all been suspended. The bill use this as an opportunity to continue ordinary sessions, despite more than 78 of 128 members of Congress demanding to return to regular session. Instead, he opted to create a permanent commission composed of 9 deputies aligned with the Speaker Party. Through this structure, interim appointments could be imposed as officials of the National Election Council and Electoral Justice Tribunal are suspended or removed. Finally, the role of public ministry has been subject of debate. Various opposition parties have alerted that the Attorney General, Joel Zelaya, nephew for candidate Rick Simocala, has been making decisions favoring his office, including legally contested actions against elected authorities. Some officials in this environment temporarily left the country, prosecution, or death. For members of Congress and of the Trump administration, strengthening electoral transparency is essential. Washington maintains significant influence in the country. Security operation, family ties, and deep bilateral economic cooperation. I commend the committee members for being here today and discussing this very important election. In less than 10 days,
Thank you, Ambassador Trujillo. I now recognize Mrs. Olmer for her opening statement.
Thank you. Chairwoman Salazar, Ranking Member Castro, and members of the Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, thank you for this opportunity to address this hearing. I've worked and lived in Honduras, where I witnessed the post-election violence in 2017. As you know, NDI organized a bipartisan pre-election assessment mission when we visited the country early August. NDI's findings and recommendations and assistance to a broad citizen observation initiative of the Observadores Electorales de Honduras inform my observations. NDI's work is currently supported by the National Endowment for Democracy. As NDI Honduras heads to the November 30th elections in just 10 days, the stakes extend far beyond its borders. At a moment when democracy is being tested across the globe, this vote will determine more than who governs Honduras. It will shape the country's stability and influence regional security and U.S. strategic interests in Central America. A credible election in Honduras is essential to avoiding a slide into deeper political instability. The real stake lies beyond electoral disputes, which can trigger immediate unrest. The larger danger is more profound. A leadership that assumes office without a genuine mandate, weakening democratic checks, further eroding public confidence, and undermining the country's governability in lasting ways. Washington has good reason to care. Honduras is already a major point for cocaine moving from South America to the United States. Political turmoil could make this already serious problem much worse. The country is also home to Sotocano Air Base, a key hub for U.S. military operations in Central America. And with more than 200 U.S. companies operating in Honduras, instability could put significant American investment at risk. In short, Honduras' stability matters to American security, economic interests, and the lives of thousands of families with deep ties in both countries. Yet, Hondurans face this election with deep distrust in their government, rooted in the 2009 constitutional crisis that led to a coup d'etat and the 2017 presidential re-election when allegations of fraud resulted in deadly post-election violence. Recent votes have only stoked public mistrust and instability. The March general primaries were marred by failures to safeguard ballots, and significant voting delays occurred in the country's two largest cities of Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula. Since its August mission, NDI has heard consistent concerns about undue political interference and legal pressures on the National Electoral Council and the Electoral Justice Tribunal. These actions contribute to a serious deterioration of democratic norms. Sustained attacks from other branches of government against electoral authorities deepen the risk of prolonged political crisis. In this respect, the work of the National Electoral Council hinges on the cooperation of all political actors and government institutions, including the armed forces, which are constitutionally mandated not only with safeguarding the ballots or providing overall election security, but also with guaranteeing the orderly alternation of power. The Honduran people deserve credible and transparent elections in which their votes are counted accurately and their voices are respected. NDI is still hopeful that a credible and transparent election is possible. To that end, the timing of this hearing, Madam Chairwoman, is perfect. I would like to offer the following recommendations. One, that Congress should continue voicing its strong bipartisan backing for free, fair, and transparent elections in Honduras, including through public statements, letters, and continued engagement with the Honduran authorities and civil society. Two, that the United States should continue working with the Organization of American States to initiate and sustain dialogue efforts, which will be essential as the election approaches and in the immediate aftermath when tensions may run high. Three, the United States should explicitly affirm its importance of Honduran observers and convey its strong support for their work, emphasizing that nonpartisan and independent observation is essential for public confidence in their vote. Chairwoman Salazar, Ranking Member Castro, and members of the subcommittee, thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks to you, Ms. Palmer. And I now recognize Mr. Roy for the opening and last statement. Thank you.
Chairwoman Salazar, Ranking Member Castro, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm here on behalf of Human Rights First to discuss the upcoming elections in Honduras and the ways in which recent U.S. foreign assistance decisions have impacted the ability to support electoral observation, civil society oversight, media programs, and anti-corruption efforts. As you know, Honduras enters its next electoral cycle already burdened by increased polarization, a legacy of irregular elections, and a justice system that has been hollowed out by political manipulation and organized crime infiltration. There undoubtedly is a need for increased vigilance and raising of the alarm on the Honduras election. However, the Trump administration has been relatively silent and taken a largely transactional approach to the Castro government focused mainly on deportations. According to Human Rights First, ICE Flight Monitor, the United States from January to October 2025 carried out 353 deportation flights to Honduras, making it the second highest deportation destination after Guatemala.